sign up because they didn't actually want to give public comment, but we still want you to sign up for the record that you are here and in attendance, just so that we know who's participating and listening from the audience. So, Deanna, maybe you already sent the sheet around, so if you could sign it, even if you don't intend to come up during the public comment period. Thank you. So with that, we will move into the public comment period. I want to thank you all. Oh, actually, before we do that, is there any other legislative updates or things that anyone wants to wrap up? I know we didn't get a chance to speak or talk to Richard.
Won't fall under legislative updates. They're kind of emerging issues.
Okay.
So at the last council meeting, we found out that the National Marine Fisheries Service is going to reinitiate consultation on the effect of council-managed fisheries on southern resident killer whale. So that, I just bring that up because that will be an issue that we're going to have to watch. What that means yet, we don't know. The other issue that's come up, and I don't know if people are aware of this or not, is California is shutting down their commercial Dungeness crab fishery on April 15th to prevent whale entanglement. So I suspect that's an issue that will also move our way. So I just mentioned those because those are a couple of things. To put the killer whale thing in perspective, there were some folks from the University of Washington whale researchers that asked the council to set aside between 400 and 600,000 adult Chinook salmon a year for the southern resident killer whale population. That exceeds our legal harvest by several orders of magnitude.
Touch on some legislative stuff really quickly, if that's okay.
So Malia, you're next. Thank you.
So Department of State Lands just is, kind of a couple of, thank you.
So I think a couple of topics that might be of interest to some of the folks in the room. This year the Department of State Lands introduced a bill, it's 2272, but that's not really useful anymore. As we started to work the bill and look into it more, we realized that I think it will be worth some larger conversations and some interagency coordination. The bill originally was proposing that we establish an additional essentially an additional fee for folks who are looking for waterway leases to start pooling that money to be able to purchase insurance. So this was in response to the Goebel incident, some of the things that we're looking at with Portland Harbor, and a number of issues that are beginning to happen with more frequency around abandoned and derelict vessels. And so we've spoken with DEQ, with Parks, with the Marine Board. All of us have sort of been seeing these incidents come up more often and more frequently, and without really a fund that's sizable to respond to it, or a proactive policy to approach sort of deterring some of these incidences from developing. So the bill has died because we think that rather than just one agency trying to establish one fund to approach what's a larger statewide issue for both the coastal ways along the ocean, but also riverways throughout, we're going to be sitting down and talking about this more. And so some of you will probably hear more from us or be hearing from the group as we reach out to folks who have either dealt with this in the past. Ports will certainly be involved, so just thought I would put that on your radar, that I think there will be some larger conversations within the state of Oregon over the next year or so around how we respond to abandoned and derelict vessels. And then Kristen mentioned wetlands when she was talking about conservation and carbon and the benefits that wetlands have. I think most of us in the room have an appreciation for the value that wetlands brings, and so I think some of you are probably aware that last year, what at the time was the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee. And anyway, Representative Clem had Representative McLean and David Rocksmith convene a wetlands work group. And that work group worked over the summer as well as into the fall on kind of identifying areas within the state of Oregon where we can create efficiencies or shore up protections or just kind of revisit wetland policy. And so a couple of bills emerged out of that work group, and I'll give them to you just for your own interest if anyone wants to look into them more in a very brief summary of what they are. But House Bill 2436 opens the door for the state of Oregon to begin pursuing a partial assumption of the Core 404 permit. And so that bill is actually has some amendments coming, but is scheduled for a work session next week. So if anyone has questions about that or would like to look into that more, again, it's House Bill 2436, and I'm happy to field any questions that you might have for that. House Bill 2437 has to do very specifically with agricultural maintenance drainage. A small policy change there. If anyone, again, has questions, let me know. That's 2437. House Bill 2438 opens a discussion about the possibility of public mitigation banking when you're talking about mitigating for wetlands. And then separately from that group of wetland bills, one bill that I would bring to the attention of for some of the folks in this room is House Bill 2796. I think for most of you that do wetlands mitigation of any kind, you're aware that currently Oregon standard is that for every acre of wetland that you're going to develop in, you have to mitigate an acre somewhere else or the equivalent. House Bill 2796 proposes that we, in the case of degraded wetlands, lower that mitigation rate to a 1-to-4 ratio, which would mean that for every 4 acres you develop, you would only have to mitigate an acre. So the Department of State Lands has submitted a letter just outlining how that's in conflict with our policy and what some of our concerns would be around the loss of wetland benefits if that were to pass. That bill has a work session tomorrow. So if anyone has interest in that, again, it's 2796, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that as well. So I think that's all that's happening at the Department of State Lands. There's just a couple of things I thought some folks here might want to know about.
Thank you, Millie, and I think that out of all of those, because I've been working on all of them, the one that's most closely related to OPAC is going to be the 404 partial assumption,
Right.
which would affect the coastal program and other aspects of coastal zone management. So, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks. So
Can
when I
you
gave
talk
my
right into the microphone?
yeah, you bet.
Sorry, would you get really close?
So during my introduction, I did fail to mention that part of my change role at DEQ, I'm no longer actually administering the ballast water program. I'm now in the director's office in a senior policy and legislative advisory role. And in that capacity, steeped in a few bills, just a few. So just want to provide a couple of updates. One, just to follow up on Bryn's comments about some bills. I don't think you mentioned House Bill 2250, the governor's bill. Generally, just a bill to require DEQ as well as OHA to closely monitor federal regulatory developments to ensure that no policy changes result in any rollback of federal regulations relative to regulations that were in place as of January 19th, 2017. Obviously, relative date to certain federal changes. That bill did pass the House and is on to the Senate Environmental Natural Resources Committee. Other areas with regards to harmful algal blooms, I did just want to clarify and mention that those bills, 3340 and 3326, are specific to freshwater harmful algal blooms and would not provide any resources related to estuarine or marine HABs. They're a direct response to concerns about vulnerability and susceptibility of drinking water systems. The appropriations in those two bills, or in one of those bills, I should say, does reflect the funding that was requested by DEQ in a policy option package. That package is not in the governor's recommended budget, so there's ongoing discussions about how that could work out. And then lastly, just wanted to mention that from our land quality programs side, there's a number of bills related to our emergency response work. There's some work specific to identifying high hazard rail routes and needs for developing mitigation plans or contingency plans rather, and some work that would help facilitate and bolster our ability and our agency to update geographic response plans statewide with some implications for the coastal zone as well. And then there's also there's a bill to increase fees to support our emergency response work around oil spill prevention from large maritime transport activities. It would provide a minor increase, but needed increase to help our emergency response capacity, again, sort of statewide. Thanks.
Thank you. Shelby?
So I don't have a legislative update, but I did have a response to Richard's point about the closure of the California Dungeness season. So this was in response to the settlement with the lawsuit filed by the Center for Biological Diversity. And Oregon is being very proactive on this issue. So there is a whale entanglement working group that's been established. It's been in place for a year or two now. And the working group consists of fishermen, NGOs, state managers. So they're looking actively at how Oregon can be proactive in addressing this and not have to be responsive to outside influences like a lawsuit. And if OPAC would like more information on that, we can certainly make that available.
David?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to just bring up a couple of points that I've been working on recently. I'm the newest member of the NACO, National Association of Counties, EELU, Environment, Energy, and Land Use Steering Committee. And one of the things we took up in Washington, D.C. 4 weeks ago was the issue of in lieu of mitigation for wetlands restoration. Oftentimes, people can't mitigate properly. They can do in lieu of fees. And unfortunately, at the national level, many times when mitigation is done, when these dollars are used, the dollars are used outside of the original watershed in which these mitigation fees are paid. So we're making recommendations to Congress right now to make sure that these fees get used within the same watershed, which I think is very important. I think it will have some implications for California, or excuse me, for Oregon. One other thing I want to mention that I am on the AOC, the Association of Oregon Counties, and OWEB, Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, Tide Gate Steering Committee, and we're working very hard on making sure, and it has some direct impact on what we're doing here at OWEB. But we're putting together an office of tide gates and a way to fund this, and we're making a lot of progress on the on the tide gates issues, which is a huge issue all over the Oregon County. So that's moving forward very well. Also.
And there are bills in the legislature that would help fund some of this type D work, including liaisons, so, and it does matter since all these tide gates and wetlands are the nursery of our fishery fleet, so, all right, with that, okay, I also wanna make sure, if you guys on the phone have anything, make sure you ping Andy, otherwise I'm gonna keep moving along. This is our last comment.
Thank you. I just wanted to draw attention to a new bill that was dropped last week, which is Senate Bill 1025, which concerns clam harvest and focuses on Tillamook Bay. There's a hearing tomorrow afternoon, I believe, on that bill. And so it's a location and a subject that is of interest to many OPAC members, and it's so recent in terms of the legislative process. I just want to make sure that people are aware that it's there. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. 1025.
It was dropped last week.
Yeah, it is sponsored by some of the Coastal Caucus members, including Senator Johnson, Senator Roseland, I believe Representative Brock Smith.
So legislative session will go until June, but there is a big deadline on April 9th, so bills need to be out of their first committee and through a work session April 9th. So in the coming days, you will hear, about 2,000 bills die over in the building. And the window will keep narrowing as we march along towards the end of the session. But in the meantime, all these are still in play, and there's a bazillion hearings in the coming days on these work sessions, so it's a kind of a crunch time. So thank you for that update and bringing everything to our attention and just making sure that we're staying apprised and relevant on all the legislative activities. So with that, we're going to